Welcome to the Big Bets on Campus podcast. Collin Wilson and I will be hitting the college diamond once more for the final week of the regular season in college baseball. We'll be mixing our thoughts on the futures market as well as his projections Thursday through Saturday in terms of those matchups. But if you've been listening the past few weeks, we've been peppering in teams and players to keep an eye on. And it's like we've had a crystal ball because we talked about the Oregon Ducks. They were at 50-1. I wrote it up in the New York Post. You were singing their praises, Collin. They're now the fifth team in the country in terms of the ranking. They're down to about 25-30-1 in the market. And a big part of that is the fact that, it's such an SEC dominated sport that people can kind of fall asleep at the wheel a bit. So what we've been doing throughout this entire, time here on the pod, stretching back about 6 episodes, has been walking you through the teams to keep an eye on to be able to put yourself in a position to have really good value entering the tournament. And also just from an entertainment standpoint, like take, for example, Ike Irish for Auburn. We talked about him in the last episode. Not only has he been a demon at the plate, but then he goes ahead and saves the Tigers, throwing out a guy about 250 feet from home plate, throwing from left center. And, that was a critical out against South Carolina. They end up winning that game by a single run. They sweep the Gamecocks, who have now essentially replaced Mizzou as the free square in the SEC, and they remain absolutely red hot. So as we said, this is all about identifying those teams ahead of time so that you can be in the know early. But with all of that being said, the long shots, the mid tiers, we've kind of paid lip service a little bit in the futures market, at least, to those top teams, those big dogs. And that's what the top of this episode is all about, Colin. I want you to kick the tires on about 6 to 8 teams at the very top of the odds board to say, which of these teams should we add to the portfolio now to be able to have kind of a balanced portfolio heading into the NCAA tournament selection next week? So we're finally going to have our regionals. You're going to have your path to the super regionals and Omaha. So let's get it started there. Who are some teams at the top of the rankings that have piqued your interest at their current price?
Well, first off, I'm going to kick the tires on your outfit. I appreciate you bringing Tennessee gear to our podcast on the week that they are coming to Fayetteville. It is going to be heated. It's going to be contested. If you don't know the history between Tony Vitello and Dave Van Horn, do a little research. There could be some extracurriculars on the field this weekend in Baum Walker Stadium for a Tennessee team that is really fighting to make a super regional seed and for an Arkansas team that needs to win a series. You're right, Calabrese. Let's talk about – so what we've done all year is try to position ourselves into futures that are 30-1 or better, into teams that we know are going to be regional hosts, into possible situations where they'll have a good navigation path to get to Omaha. This podcast, being the last one of the regular season, it's time to flip that script. It's time to look at probably the top 8, figure out which one is the best, who's going to have a good path to get to Omaha, and fire in on that team no matter what the number is. It's time to get down on the super teams of the season. So I'm going to start off real quick with LSU. Now they're going to play at South Carolina. They won their series against Arkansas this past weekend in Alex Box Stadium. Arkansas absolutely imploded in game 1, a game that went till 2-3 o'clock in the morning. Arkansas came back in game 3, but LSU took the series. Cade Anderson is healthy. That's the most important thing people need to know about LSU, is that he left that first game against Arkansas with some discomfort. He came out the next day. He did his whole pitching routine the day after his start. Cade Anderson is going to be fine, but I would watch him in game 1 here against South Carolina. Anthony Ianson is untouchable. He has been so unbelievable. I think 4 earned runs given up in his last 4 games. He's striking out about $1 billion. I think we're going to talk about him a little bit later. When you look at what LSU has done on the road, I think people will complain about their strength of schedule. They didn't play anybody out of conference. My argument is, why in the hell do you need to play teams out of conference when you're playing SEC, who's going to send 14 of 16 teams? So LSU is battle tested. They have lost 2 of their last 3 road series against Texas A&M and Auburn, but we consider them because they're going to be a super regional seed and they're going to host an Alex Box. They don't have to worry about the road until they get to Omaha.
Yeah, just to follow up there, you mentioned their top 2 pitchers. They're striking everybody out. They're suppressing runs. But by SEC standards, this is just a really good lineup, not necessarily one of those monster lineups. Do you have any concerns once they get to Omaha and the opportunity where teams just mash the ball and outscore opponents? Do you think they could find themselves in deep water if they need to score 6 or 7 runs in a critical game there in Nebraska?
Of the 8 teams we're going to talk about here at the top, they don't have the best hitting stats, but that being said, they don't have the worst, right? I mean, they're 32nd in on base, they're 29th in homers per 9, and they're 19th in slugging. They can hit when they need. It's going to have to be clutch and it's going to have to be timely. The pitching is what is leading this staff, and they are by far the best from a team fit perspective out of all the teams we're going to talk about.
Now, the most intriguing non-SEC series really of the year could be here in Tallahassee this week. We got FSU and North Carolina, a top 4 matchup. On paper, lots to love about the Noles. They can pound the ball out of the ballpark. They've been strong on the road this year. They have obviously an elite arm in Jamie Arnold. He's someone who's going to be a top 3 pick in the Major League Baseball draft upcoming. There's a lot of publications that list him as the number 1 prospect. When you look under the hood with him a little bit and you look at his advanced pitching stats, there's some concerns there, right?
Yeah, there is. And I think saying something about Jamie Arnold that's in a negative light is kind of sacrilegious, but he does have a 3.2 ERA and he has a 4 xFIP. So that shows that there has been a little bit of luck and there is going to be some regression here. And Jamie Arnold is not, he hasn't been elite in some of his starts. Sometimes he has the ability to do that. Now, this week they're going to host North Carolina. That is such a huge series because this series could absolutely flip the pecking order in the top 8 of which ACC team is the best. Listen, Florida State, they've won every ACC road series except for Louisville on April 25th. They're going to be a super regional seed. They are going to host, and I kind of have a soft spot in my heart for them. Florida State and Arkansas, perennially super regional hosts. Neither of them have ever won the College World Series, so we'll have our eyes on Florida State this weekend.
You mentioned LSU being the new number 1. The former number 1 Texas has been taken on water lately. Swept by Arkansas, truly outclassed in that series. They dropped all 3 games by a combined 19 runs. Then the Gators take 2 out of 3 in Austin from them. Have we flipped the narrative, though, from them being overrated and the drop-off coming to them now being undervalued at 20-1 out in the market?
I believe they're priced almost properly, although I would like to see a dip, 25, 30-1. And listen, last month, you and I have been harping on regression coming for this Texas team, that they are not as good as what their numbers say, especially from a pitching staff perspective. Ruger Riojas, ever since he got moved as the Friday night starter because of injury, his ERA and his xFIP is over 5. The staff is ranked top 10 in staff ERA, but that's kind of where the magic show is because the team xFIP is way lower than it is from a team ERA standpoint, which means there's going to be regression. They lost a series at home to the Gators. By the way, Florida's really hot. They were swept by Arkansas. I think Texas, with the right number 2 and 3 seed in Austin, is going to be fade material. They're definitely not going to be the future at the end of this show.
The other side of that ACC showdown in Florida's state capital is North Carolina. Are the Tar Heels really just a one-man show in terms of DeCaro being able to carry them through regionals, through super regionals, get them to Omaha? Or can this lineup stay hot when the competition improves next month?
I think it's put up or shut up time for DeCaro this weekend. I mean, he got rained out last weekend. He's given up 4 earned runs since April 5th. That came against Wake, Virginia Tech, Pitt, and he did Campbell in an early week pitching matchup last week. So the overall hitting is a little bit worrisome. I talked about LSU not having as much pop as their SEC peers. North Carolina is kind of in the same boat. As far as their ACC peers, they're just not hitting as much. Their recent run, though, I think you have to really pay attention for individual betting on the overs with North Carolina. Look at what they've done in game 1 of their ACC series lately. They scored 15 against Pitt. They scored 9 against Virginia Tech. 11 against Wake? The sticks are raking in the openers, but overall, the hitting is just not there. I don't know if it's great coaching or scouting and why they're tearing up number 1 starters on ACC opponents. So keep your eyes on overs on UNC in the first game, because something is really working with the sticks, and then they just go dead the rest of the series. But DeCaro is the watch this weekend.
As I mentioned at the top, we have been all over Oregon lately. I gave him out in the post at 50-1. Grinsell at the top of their rotation has been missing a lot of bats. His velocity range is a big reason for that. He's in the low 90s in terms of his fastball. His breaking stuff drops down to the low 70s. So that can obviously help him in terms of strikeouts and run suppression. And then you got Neville leading the college baseball in home runs this season by a wide margin. So having one of the best power hitters and having a great ace at the top of the rotation, that's a nice recipe. And this is a team that went to supers last year, and assuming they don't flame out of the Big Ten tournament, they're going to host a regional in Eugene. But is that enough for them to get to Omaha? I understand that they're not going to be a super regional seed, so they're going to have to take their show on the road. This is a team that has performed very well throughout the year against quad 1 competition. They've lived inside the top 10 in terms of road RPI throughout the season. Are you still a believer in the Ducks at this reduced number at 30-1?
I never thought on a gambling podcast we'd be discussing the Big Ten tournament in baseball, but we're here because Oregon and UCLA are actually power players. They're going to Iowa this weekend, but the Ducks have won 11 of their last 12. That includes a sweep of Oregon State. Very impressive. There's some people out there that will talk about their strength of schedule, which was handed to them by their conference. They'll talk about their quad 1-2 record. Listen, they're top 10 in homers per 9. That's thanks to Neville. Mason Neville is the best hitter in the nation. Grayson Grinzel has been absolutely electric. 31 innings pitched over the last 4 games. Only 4 earned runs given up to Washington, Michigan State, Oregon State, and UCLA. Now, you can throw those first 2 teams away, but Oregon State and UCLA are competing to be regional hosts, potentially super regional hosts for Oregon State. So what Grayson Grinzel has been able to do has been fantastic. Mason Neville has been fantastic. This is a super regional seed that is going to have a path through Eugene to make it to Omaha. I'm glad we grabbed our 50-1. We'll have to see by the end of the show if we're going to go dip into their numbers again this week.
You mentioned it just a bit ago in terms of how deep the SEC is. Let's look at another contender. Auburn has faced the most difficult schedule in America, and they've risen to number 2 in the RPI. But we just saw Sam Dutton get hammered by a South Carolina team that's not very good. Can they make it to Omaha if he's not special at the top of the rotation?
The Sticks have to keep it up. The Sticks have been absolutely insane lately. Auburn is peaking right now, and I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, because these offenses go into peaks and valleys, and right now Auburn is really in 5th gear. Winners of 10 of their last 12. That includes a series win at Tennessee. Very impressive. They swept LSU in mid-April. It seems like, years ago. They put up 46 runs in 3 games against South Carolina. And I think that's where we need to focus, because if Dutton is going to get hammered, you're going to have to score 46 runs in 3 games like they did against South Carolina pitching. So the overall stats, they don't really prove how dominant this team has been lately. Now they have to go on the road. They have to prove it again at Ole Miss. If Auburn takes that series at Ole Miss, I think they're a true national title contender. I'm just glad that we got a future on them, like 40-1 on a prior show. So I'm happy with where we're at when it comes to the Tigers.
All right, let's climb into the trust tree here for a second, Collin. There's so much to love about this Hogs team, the starting pitching, the defense, the power hitting up and down the lineup. But we've seen bullpens betray contenders before. Does Vitello have the creativity and the depth in his pen to mix and match his way to a national title?
Listen, I know for the shade that I throw Tony Vitello, I think he's an amazing coach. And when Dave Van Horn decides to end his career of 4 decades, I hope Vitello is the guy that we go and grab. But that being said, that's it. I'm done being nice about Tony Vitello. The Hogs choked game 1 against LSU in Alex Box last weekend. Setup guy Aiden Jimenez, who has been our eighth inning guy, just could not locate a single pitch. Specifically, he can't locate his off speed. Now, I don't know. It's happened before to Aiden Jimenez. He was just on fire all year. I think it's time for him to step back. We'll see if Parker Coyle, who is now back in that weekend role after a big long absence. We'll see if Christian Fauch is going to close games. Is Gabe Gackle going to continue to play the glue guy? There are other arms in this pen, but Aiden Jimenez is the one that's been getting the call in the 8th inning, and he is the one that has been giving up walks, cannot locate, and giving up the runs. The lineup can rake better than any team on this list from top to bottom. Even the caboose crew that's at the 7, 8, 9 at the bottom of this order, they can all go deep. Their fielding percentage for the Razorbacks is 4th in the nation. They do not make a mistake. Iredale at third base just bare hands balls and fires them all over the infield. I mean, he's absolutely insane. This entire lineup is perfect from a fielding percentage perspective, and they can smack balls. The problem is the bullpen. Got to keep your eyes on the bullpen with the Razorbacks, especially this weekend against Tennessee.
Before we were talking about Oregon, we were talking about Oregon State about a month ago on the West Coast. They get swept by the Ducks. And this staff has issues compared to the other top teams that we're discussing here. That being said, 40-1 is available. You get an incredible generational player in Arquette at short. He's just one of those rare players. He's a monster. He's 6'5", 220, raw power, a fun team. Is there anything more to it than a fun narrative, or is there some value still out there at 40-1?
It's a lot of there's good feelings about Oregon State, and then there's some not so good feelings. And, the first future that I made this year was a 33-1 on Oregon State. Mostly they went to an independent schedule. They tried to play as many tough teams as possible in some of those tournaments early in February. Then they handpicked their schedule and played some really tough teams. So from an RPI perspective, that is going to get them as a contender for a super regional seed. They took the series against Iowa this past weekend in the Iowa Cubs ballpark. And the week before that, they took 3 or 4 on the island against a Hawaii team that's kind of been on the bubble, flirting with making regionals. Boy, it's hard to talk about Hawaii baseball and not think about Hawaii football, but we're getting there, right? We're getting close. Listen, Oregon State has a great overall resume. The sweep in Eugene looks bad. It stings. But this is a super regional host. If they can sweep Long Beach State, they should. Long Beach, 22-28, an RPI of 154th. I would expect the Beavers to take care of business, mostly because they don't have a conference tournament. They have nowhere to play after this weekend. Their resume is their resume. Nearly, though, let's throw some cold water on them. Nearly the worst staff ERA and FIP of all 8 teams we just talked about. For that 33-1 that I bought back in January, and I know it's on the Action app, so I feel like there's a lot of people that have it too. This is probably going to be a super's hedge. I think 40-1 is a really good number right now. I think there's a really good chance they're hosting in Corvallis. I think this is a super's hedge team.
Now, a lot of these series have been pushed up a day, so the Thursday card is robust. It's filled to the brim because conference tournaments start early next week. So let's go through, some of the ones that you put out in terms of your projections, the one that you're targeting. Let's start with the Red River rivalry. Texas really needs to get, rowing in the same direction as a team from a momentum perspective at the very least. And unfortunately, they're staring at Kyson Witherspoon on the bump in game 1 for the Sooners. How much is he worth in this spot? Like, how far up would you go in terms of laying a number? And if you really believe in him suppressing the Longhorn Bats, do you just go ahead with a run line or perhaps an alternate run line?
Yeah, I mean, Kyson Witherspoon has been our guy all season, and he's going up against a guy that we've been fading for the last month in Ruger Rijoas. So, it's obvious that we're going to be playing Oklahoma here in this opening game. I project minus 180. All of these projections, by the way, will be on my Twitter feed through 3 straight, so you can go check those out if you want. But I project minus 180 in the opening game for OU against Texas. I'll be looking for anything at minus 180 or less. I think you play the run line here. Oklahoma has been – they sweep teams they shouldn't. They get swept by teams they shouldn't. So it's very interesting here. But a lot of people are going to be on Texas's series. I think Oklahoma should absolutely be favored in the first one. And that's all driven by analytics. That's all driven by calculated base runs. That's all driven by team XFIP. That's all driven by the starters numbers. So Kyson Witherspoon should absolutely be the favorite here. I'd play him up to minus 180.
South Carolina, as I mentioned, lit up Auburn's top starter, but LSU looks to be on the warpath at this point. Maybe an over in game 1?
I think so, because South Carolina South Carolina's pitching, we just said, gave up 36 runs in a few games. That's bad. Cade Anderson, though, we'll see how effective he is coming off that discomfort against Arkansas in game 1. I'm wondering if that gives him a shorter leash. I'm wondering if he's limited to 60 or 80 pitches. That could get into a pen where maybe some Tuesday, Wednesday guys for LSU get to throw. I do look at that over specifically because South Carolina is the new free square in the SEC. That's tough to say with Missouri sweeping Texas A&M. South Carolina has definitely given up a lot of runs from a pitching perspective, so I think an over is the look here. But keep your eyes on Cade Anderson. That discomfort, we'll see how much of discomfort it was last week when he left the Arkansas game.
Thursday night in Iowa City, just a tremendous pitching matchup between Grinsell and Obermueller. Ducks got to have this road sweep, but do you think that pressure impacts them? BBOC covers college basketball, college football, college baseball. We see it in college football, teams going for bowl eligibility, or in college hoops, teams that are on the bubble. Sometimes that pressure does not bring out the best performances. So where do you come down on this must-win game for the Ducks, where perhaps they're going to go off as a dog?
There's been an interesting dynamic in college baseball that played out in college basketball and college football. Do you remember when we had problems with Penn State going out to USC in football? Do you remember when some of these West Coast teams went to the East Coast to play these Big Ten teams? It's just something where you absolutely cannot travel over 2 time zones. And the against the spread numbers in football proved it out. Basketball proved it out. And we're having the same problem here. So my eyes are on Oregon and Grayson Grinsell on this opening game against Iowa. I'm looking to take Grinsell at Iowa. The Ducks need this series, all 3 games, to get a super regional seed. I project Iowa as the favorite again. And, we did that last week against Oregon State, and Oregon State did just fine against Iowa. And then you go and you look at the strength of schedule and the resume that Iowa's put together. It's just not the same as an Oregon State. It's just not the same as an Oregon in general. So what you're getting is possibly numbers from a calculated base runs perspective and an ERA and XFIP perspective for Cade Obermueller that doesn't match his competition with Grayson Grinsell. So I do project Iowa as a small favorite here. I don't think odds makers are going to come out that way. I think Oregon's going to be the favorite here, and I would back them.
Another gem with Doyle versus Root in Fayetteville. This has Omaha vibes. What are you seeing in game one?
Absolutely electric. It will be well, every Razorback game is a must watch, but this is a game I project Root and Doyle going minus 110 both ways. Arkansas has been an under team in the opening series every single game. There's some storms coming into Fayetteville. The wind at Baum Walker has a way to push in and has a way to push out. It just depends on the northwesterly flow, the southwestern flow. It just depends which direction the Gulf of Mexico is meeting that Rocky Mountain wind and which way it's going to come into Fayetteville. But I'm keeping my eyes on Fayetteville for totals this weekend. Definitely Friday night unders. And I'm always looking, of course, this week it's Thursday. I'm always looking at game one unders, and I'm generally looking at game three overs, because by then Dave Van Horn is more than happy to have a quick pull on Landon, our game three starter, and get into that bullpen and let some Tuesday, Wednesday guys go. Plus the sticks, by the time they've seen this bullpen and this staff, Arkansas's team is raking as series goes. So that's how I'm going to play it this weekend. But as far as the first game on Thursday night, this is Omaha level. This is College World Series championship type stuff. Liam Doyle, Zach Root. If you see one team favored one way or another outside of minus 110, that's the team that has value.
From Gulf of America weather to sticking with America's team, let's continue to talk about Arkansas here. My question with Gage Wood is his numbers going to line up in terms of his ERA and his xFIP, because they are far apart and they tell two separate stories. He got fed to the Bayou Bengals at Alex Box in his last start, but listen, that happens to a lot of really good pitchers. You know, when you look at how well they played historically on their home diamond. Good rebound spot in game two against the Vols, in your opinion?
I absolutely think so. Gage Wood went on the road into Alex Box, hostile environment. What's weird is his numbers. The problem, what happened in LSU, is that he couldn't locate his off speed. He is filthy, absolutely filthy. And if he's not getting the calls in the strike zone, it affected him a lot in the way that he was throwing the ball. Eventually, he got knocked around. I think it was 12-0 before I actually turned the TV off. I went to another game. I can't believe I turned a Razorback game off, but at 12-0, I tapped out. He couldn't locate his off speed. We'll see if he can here when he gets some home cooking. His numbers are very interesting, Calabrese. Like you mentioned, his ERA is 5.5. His xFIP is 2.9. I've never seen a discrepancy that way. Now, it's like the opposite of Ruger Riojas for Texas, right? It's like low ERA, high xFIP. Well, Gage Wood is the opposite, which means his ERA is saying that he's bad. His xFIP is saying that he's actually really, really good, which he is. When he is on, nobody's hitting anything that he has because he's pure filth. And it's the opposite for Marcus Phillips, who's going to go for Tennessee. 3.4 ERA, xFIP of 4.5. I would look for Arkansas in game two. Again, minus 110-ish, minus 130-ish. I would favor the Razorbacks here.
Anthony Ianson gets the game ball in game two. You project him at minus 520, one of the biggest favorites on the board. If you were running the Collin Wilson Superbook, how high would you make this number to make sure that people aren't just getting a free parlay sweetener against South Carolina? Because, as you mentioned it, South Carolina is now in that Mizzou free square territory.
Yeah. Well, South Carolina is a corpse. Steal a Stucky term there. They're an absolute corpse. I would make this minus 520 for LSU. That's not what the number is going to be. I mean, you have to remember that Texas A&M was hosting Missouri last week, and the odds makers, I think, had the games lined around like minus 6,000. I mean, it was absolutely out of control. And I expect with this, the odds makers know that South Carolina is basically done for the season, and they've given up. So I don't expect a minus 520 here. There are a couple of books that do have out props on pitchers. And if you can find an Anthony Ianson 12.5, 13.5 Ks, I'd probably go that route. But I would make it minus 520 against South Carolina. I would absolutely play the run line here. LSU can essentially cement their spot at the top, win one game in Hoover, and probably have the number one overall seed. So look for Ianson to keep it going here. He's averaging 7, 8, 9 innings every time he goes out. He's getting double digit in Ks. I don't expect that to stop, because right now, Jay John, these head coaches, they want their pitchers to stay in a rhythm on their days before they get to regionals. So expect Ianson to absolutely be throwing flames on the road.
With so many offenses heating up, we could see a pitcher's duel in Nashville on Friday. Would you play under 11 between the Cats and Doors?
Kentucky must win the series against Vandy, but Nick McKay scares me as a pitcher for Kentucky. He is supporting a FIP and an xFIP over 6.3. It is hard for me to look at an under on a Kentucky pitcher that, Yeah, you can say what you want about Kentucky's pop. There just isn't much there. It's small ball type stuff. But Nick McKay is giving up way too many runs, and Vandy is hot right now. Just won the series in Tennessee. So I would certainly play a Kentucky team total under. I would certainly play a Vandy team total over, although I have not seen those offered until regionals and super regionals once we get there. But that's what's going on with Kentucky right now. I mean, it's a must-win series, but they're not going to get it done against Vandy.
Underdog is one of the best places to make picks during playoff basketball, and while they score buckets, you could score cash. Underdog is one of the leading sports apps, and you can play right now in your state. Their app has over 100,000 five-star reviews and millions of players. To play, all you have to do is download the app and choose whether a player will go higher or lower on one of their stats. You can choose from things like points, assists, so much more on the board. And once your pick feels good, you can play it for as little as $1. And if you get everything right, putting it together, you could win up to 1,000 times your money. That's right. Turn $1 into $1,000 just with your sports knowledge. It's been Miles Turner's season for me with the Pacers. He's been cruising past his points projections left and right. And that's what's so great about Underdog. You can just ride the hot hand and start stacking cash. Download the Underdog app and sign up with the promo code BBOC to unlock a special offer up to $1,000 in bonus cash when you make your first deposit. That's promo code BBOC. Must be 18 plus, 19 plus in Alabama and Nebraska, 19 plus in Colorado for some games, 21 plus in Massachusetts and Arizona, and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply, void in Colorado. Concerned with your play? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit ncpgambling.org. In Arizona, call 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text next step to 53342. And in New York, call the 24/7 Hope line at 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY. All right, let's turn to the Saturday card. There's fewer spots that you've circled at this point, and there's a lot of uncertainty, obviously 3 games into the series. But I'm confused why I'm seeing DeCaro as a dog. I know that he's on the road and he's off schedule, having been rained out of his last start, but he's plus money on this kid. I mean, I feel like that's just a play that I have to at least explore just from the fact that when he's on, he's one of the best pitchers, not only in the ACC, but in the entire country.
Yeah, it's really his season-long numbers. It's the fact that he did not start off hot. He has been lately. When you look at him against West Mendez and Florida State, there is a huge discrepancy here. And when you look at it, you look at the starting pitching ERA right here, like DeCaro 3.6, Mendez 4.8. So you think, why in the world is Florida State favored? Well, calculated base runs say North Carolina averages about 7.5. And Florida State averages about 8.2. So there's a leg up there. But then you go to the overall season xFIP, where DeCaro is 5.8 and West Mendez is 5.2. So those numbers alone are 2 of the biggest variables that power the projections. And that's why DeCaro is a small dog. I got Florida State minus 120. But you know what? Calabrese, this is the same problem I have in college football. Sometimes you got to step outside that Excel sheet. You got to step outside that database and look at who's hot. And right now DeCaro is. So I think, if this is a little bit of overinflation on the Florida State side, I would happily take North Carolina plus 1.5 backing DeCaro.
Let's close out your game projections with another one in Vandy, Kentucky. Can you share with us what you know about Connor Fennell and his impact on this matchup in Game 3?
Connor Fennell has been one of the best Game 3 starters in the SEC. He has all the analytics you can ask for when you're looking at a Sunday. This week will be a Saturday, but when you're looking at a Game 3 starter, how could you pass up a guy that's got a 3.2 ERA, a 3.1 xFIP? A lower xFIP than ERA means that pitcher is not being rated the way that he should. It means that he can actually get even better. So when his xFIP is lower than his ERA, that's what you want to look for. And we got that with Connor Fennell. I've got him marked as minus 150 or better to shut down Kentucky. It's a do or die weekend for Kentucky here. If they are hanging by a thread to make regionals, so we'll see how they do. But I love Connor Fennell as a Game 3 starter. That's just not against Kentucky. That is going to be where I am during regionals. And if they happen to make super regionals, Connor Fennell will be a very tough out if there's a rubber match in the supers.
We talked through all the futures, the teams that are intriguing, the missing components, the momentum, all of it's on the table. Who are you adding to the portfolio and pulling the trigger on at this exact moment?
Yeah, let's not make any bones about it. LSU is the play. Now, I know nationwide the number is 6-1 at a lot of places. There's a lot of places that have plus 450. There are 3 books out there that have 7-1s. So I did purchase a 7-1 full futures article. I happen to write up if you want to go check the timeline. The team is going to be a super regional host. Let's talk about LSU in general, right? because there's a lot of complaining about the fact that they didn't play anybody out of conference. I don't really care. You just took 2 of 3 from Arkansas. That's impressive. They're going to be a super regional host. They've won every home SEC series against Arkansas, Tennessee, Alabama, Mississippi State, and the Free Square Mizzou. Alex Box, 10,300. If you have not been there before, electric. It's not Baum-Walker Stadium and it's not Duty Noble, but it's definitely number 3 in the pecking order. Park factors, 1.16. What does that mean? There are 16% more runs scored in Alex Box than there is at a nationwide average. You have to bring the sticks to beat LSU. And by the way, good luck hitting against LSU. Anthony Ianson is approaching Paul Skeens levels. And I didn't really want to drop that on this podcast because we're talking about the most paramount pitcher that's been in college baseball in years. I'm not Kumar Rocker, not, Leiter Jr. I'm talking Paul Skeens put up numbers that were absolutely insane, should not have been in college baseball, immediately should have been pitching for the Pirates and their staff. And so, but when you look at what Anthony Ianson's doing, let's do a little comparison here. And by the way, Anthony Ianson's game 2 starter. He's not even game 1 for LSU. 2.9 ERA, 2.8 FIP, and a 3.6 xFIP. Those are all excellent elite numbers. For every walk that he issues, there's 4 strikeouts. Pretty impressive. And then finally, 116 Ks against 74 innings pitched. If you need a comparison to Paul Skeens, who had 122 innings pitched and 209 Ks, if you need a comparison, Paul Skeens had a 1.71 K per 9. Anthony Ianson is a 1.56 K per 9. I'm not saying Anthony Ianson is Paul Skeens. We are approaching that territory, and he is the hottest pitcher in all of college baseball. Go get your best number on LSU. There are 7-1s out there. It is very minute books that have that. 6-1 is really the nationwide thing. But LSU is going to be in Alex Box. They're going to be in Baton Rouge. That is their path to Omaha, and you cannot ignore how great that pitching staff is. And when you find that pitchers like this late in the season, you are riding them. So LSU 6-1 nationally. We'll just mark that down for the record on the podcast.
That'll do it for today's episode. Thanks again for joining us. Special thanks to my co-host Collin Wilson and our sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. I'm your host, Mike Calabrese. We will return next week with coverage of conference tournaments. We're going to record late night on Wednesday to be able to give you a look ahead into some of the quarterfinal matchups in the SEC and other major conferences. So be sure to be updating your feeds overnight when those numbers drop. Good luck with all your bets, and we'll see you here next time at the Big Bets on Campus podcast.